The New York Giants are in a very interesting predicament when it comes to filling out their roster for the 2025 season. My name's Tyler, here with my brother Ryan, and we're going to try and help out the New York Giants with our first ever mock free agency for the 2025 offseason. We're going to break it down here in a second, but before we do that, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, tackle that bell, and also leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want to see the Giants do this offseason. And Ryan, this is going to be a very interesting offseason for the New York Giants here with is it Joe Schoen or Joe Shane? Because I've had
I,
people
I
comment on
believe
the
it's Joe Shane, based off of what people have left in the comments. I have always thought that it's Joe Shone.
okay, let's just go with Brian and Joe. Brian and Joe have a
Yeah,
very they are on their last leg when it comes to
yeah,
Giants leadership and everything. And uh it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing because it'd be much simpler to know what they would do if they were first or second in this upcoming draft because like they're picking a quarterback. But we're
yeah,
going to walk through a potential scenario though is like what happens if they like a quarterback's not there. What are they going to end up doing? So we have the free agents here as of right now from last year's team on over the cap here. So top guys like Greg Van Roten, Jason Pinnock, Darius Slayton, Dory Jackson, and Aziz Ojolari. Those are going to be some of the top guys that they're going to have the main conversations on, like looking to the future. How do these guys fit within their current roster? We're going to talk about these guys here in a second when we talk about who we're going to resign and not resign. But Ryan, of those names, and are there any other names here that you think are actually going to be really crucial for them to keep?
yeah. I mean, Drew Lock is going to be interesting just because of the quarterback situation. Aziz Ojolari is interesting because he's kind of the third guy in that rotation. I mean, outside of that, a lot of these guys are just kind of bottom of the roster, like rotational players. So Jason Pinnock, it will be interesting. Greg Van Roten, it'll be interesting to see who they re-sign because I do kind of feel like some of these guys they could upgrade elsewhere. So, I mean, with that being said, let's kind of jump over into free agency here. And let's just start with the internal free agents. And start with who we released.
Mhm.
So starting things off, I guess we'll just go show all four because they're all right next to each other. But Graham Gano is 38 years old. You could save a little over $3 million by releasing him. Raheem Nunez Roches is going to be like it'll save also a little over 3.5 million. Cordell Flott and Daniel Bellinger, you'll be able to save over a little $3 million there. So saving probably like 12 to 14 million dollars just by releasing those players. I think good moves there. You can get a young kicker in the draft. I know Graham Gano is fairly clutch, or you can just re-sign him to a smaller deal. And then Raheem Nunez Roches, Cordell Flott, and Daniel Bellinger, I feel like could be upgraded elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is like they already have 48 million going into the cap as of right now, which is pretty solid. Puts them in about middle of the road. But then you go release some of these guys who just aren't really nearly as contributing, like Daniel Bellinger, even to like what was his overall production. To be fair to him, it's like he did have a pretty bad quarterback thrown to him for a majority of the year. Like he only had
Yeah.
125 yards. Like he played all 17 games, but only had 14 catches for 125 yards. So like I think you you clear up 3 million there. I think you can go get a round two tight end that could at least do that for you and have him under much more long term security from there. So that's what's going to be interesting there. There's maybe a couple other guys that they could end up going through and removing. But just to clear up a couple of space, and we're not going to go too much lower on the depth chart here, just because those guys are league minimum guys that are all replaceable, and so
Yeah.
like maybe they clear up another 5 to 10 million on some of the unrestricted or undrafted free agents that they signed for $1 million. But when it comes to who we think that they're going to end up keeping, we do think that they're just for some consistency on the offensive line, they're going to re-sign Greg Van Roten. Offensive line is definitely going to be something that they address in the free agency and also in the draft as well. But still keeping him in. I know he's older, but like it's a very cheap league minimum deal. And if you don't like us re-signing Greg Van Roten here, I think it still kind of would apply even if they went externally and found somebody else that would be like
Yeah.
$2 million or something like maybe like a Liam Eichenberg as well for like two or three. Get a veteran guy in there. Liam Eichenberg's a little bit younger, to be fair, so maybe that's the route that they go. I think another guy though too. Then they want to also keep the secondary, and that's another area for improvement. This doesn't stop them from addressing it in the draft, but Jason Pinnock and then also Dory Jackson as well. Keep those guys in the secondary, keep them on retainer, and have as much cohesiveness within this secondary as possible. Because one of the things too, secondary could be improved on, but where I think this defensive line, where this defense can really shine, is if they can get a much more dominant. Sorry, if they're already skilled edge rushers can get some compliment from Dexter Lawrence as well, who unfortunately got hurt, and then also then too as well. Or am I thinking of Demarcus Lawrence?
No,
Either
Dexter
way,
Lawrence got hurt. They
he
well,
did.
they both got hurt, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but Dexter Lawrence was more serious. And they can get another dominant piece in the middle there and have a very dominant front four. I think it would take a lot of pressure off this passing game if they were just able to rush forward, because I think they have the capabilities with the talent that
Yeah.
they have up there. So that's why I think one of the first guys that they will end up going and signing in free agency is going to be a guy like BJ Hill, coming from Cincinnati. I think he would be a good complement to what they already have going on up front, and so put him up there. And I think this is obviously extremely ideal, but I think a lot of defenses are going to want to try and find that mold of like what we saw the Eagles try and do, where like, hey, we're just going to rush four every time, and then we're going to have to drop back seven. Now it helps when you have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and then you got like
Yeah.
Nolan Smith coming around the edge. So
All on rookie contracts.
all on rookie contracts. So that helps out a bunch. I know that's very
Yeah.
specific, but it just go to show like how much help it also too in the passing game as well for that secondary when you're dropping back seven and the responsibilities are much more singularly focused for each player. So I think you go get BJ Hill. We did like 3 years, 10 millions, maybe give
Yeah.
or take a little bit, and kind of go from there. So let's add that to the cap. And then Ryan, that's the defensive line side of the ball. What do you think they should do on the offensive line side of the ball?
Yeah, I think they can go and snag a veteran like Kevin Zeitler and come in and just thrust him into the interior there and maybe help solidify some things. He is a little bit of an older guy, but going to be experienced, able to come in. I think you look at what Jermaine Illuminor was able to do with this team last year, and I think Kevin Zeitler can come in and do a fairly similar job just on the interior. You have a good running back in Tyron Tracy that you were able to get on day 3 of the draft last year. You're going to have a either older veteran quarterback or maybe a younger inexperienced quarterback. So either way, you're going to want to have a solid offensive lineman with good protection. And so I feel like going out and spending a little bit of money here and investing in the interior of this offensive line, I think is going to pay dividends later on. So go and sign Kevin Zeitler again, a little bit older. Maybe you don't guarantee all of that money, but he's still a good football player and would bring good value, I think, for the contract that he was given.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's beefing up the trenches as of right there. Um, I think that's just gonna be the overall primary, like, one of the main
Mhm.
primary focuses for this team is how do we get better in the trenches, especially on the offensive line side of the ball. The Giants' offensive line has just been atrocious. It has been battered with some injuries, like with Andrew Thomas, for example, but Evan Neal, that hasn't really worked out. So bringing in a veteran there, once again, it's definitely a stopgap. You're trying to bring in some guys, and Kevin Ziegler has contributed. He's the same age as Greg Van Roten, yes, but I think at the same time though too that there's still some juice left in those legs, from what it seems.
Yeah.
But once again though
And
too, if you don't like Kevin Ziegler there for $8 million, I think it's still going to be another offensive lineman that's going to be around that same price because they're going to have a much bigger problem they need to solve coming up here with the quarterback position that we'll talk about here shortly.
yeah, and I think you look at the Giants have 8 draft picks. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for them to invest in the interior of this offensive line later in the draft. And so I feel like when you look at these signings, I think these are much more short-minded signings where it's like, okay, like we need these guys can come in and give us starter caliber snaps right away. And then we can go out and get guys that can learn and develop behind them. So when these guys move on in a season or two, then we have guys kind of ready to step up, and then you kind of create that cycle of development. You have starting caliber players on your roster, players below them that are developing to become starting caliber players, and then hopefully that kind of starts this cycle of offensive
Yeah.
line success for the Giants because we all know that they need that very deeply. So, kind of sticking on the offensive side of the ball, another guy that I think would be an interesting target, a little bit of I don't want to say like a disappointing NFL career so far, because but for being a former third round pick, I feel like this guy. Uh, hopefully would have amounted to more, but he's a guy to me that can come in, play the outside wide receiver spot. Darius Slayton will not be retained in this mock draft just because of some of the moves that we'll make here in a second. But I think Van Jefferson can come in. He is much more of a down the field threat, but I think he would be a good complement for cheap to Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, give you a little bit more size and physicality there on the outside. So he can go, just pay him a couple $1 million there to come in for the season. And he's not going to prevent you from drafting a wide receiver at the top of the second round, or if they end up taking Travis Hunter, he's not going to be stealing snaps away from Travis Hunter on the offensive side of the ball. But again, just a experienced wide receiver that can come in and play like a true X wide receiver role.
Exactly. Yeah. And the big thing there, yeah, you're just trying to find compliments to Malik Neighbors. I
Yeah.
mean, Malik Neighbors is so wild, kind of looking at his stats for everything that happened in that quarterback room. Like, still had 1,200 receiving yards last year,
Yeah.
and he missed 2 games. And so it's any quarterback, I think, back there for New York is going to like their number one. And the first and second option is probably going to be Malik Neighbors. And so I think you're trying to find good complementary role players for him there. And so,
Yeah.
and that kind of sends us into like the final thing we're going to talk about here with New York. And so you see here they're at 37 million in cap space, and so there's still a little bit left that they could end up doing. And there's some different routes. Maybe they get secondary again. Maybe they do this, but they're very interesting because they're picking third overall, and there's really only 2 first round quarterbacks as of right now, Cam Ward and Shador Sanders, and this team needs a quarterback. And so maybe they also spend a couple of bucks here just to re-sign Drew Lock. That's the route that they go, just so they know they can back up quarterback, or maybe they go a different route. That's one of the options. But there's really, I think Ryan and I talked about it. There's 3 kind of options that they could end up going, and they could go with the much more seasoned like quarterback who is definitely going to be bridge quarterback, but maybe still got a little bit left in the tank. And there's a couple options that come to our mind. Aaron Rodgers potentially, if they want to trade for him and see the cap space. Kirk Cousins, I think, is also a very real option as well if they want to go that route. So let's just explore that route. Kirk Cousins, he's due $27.5 million in cap space. But if a trade with the Falcons, we will gladly negotiate, and then we'll take on some of that cap space as well, because we are actually under the cap as of right now, while you guys have some cap space to begin with. So if we're able to, let's hypothetically split that cap space, and you guys give us, so you guys have 8 picks. If you guys give us the 5th pick overall, like I think we would take that, it's because more about unloading this cap space here. Um, Let me know if you think that that's fair. But I think one of the
Yeah.
things with this option is you at least still get a veteran quarterback who could still run an offense. It- We all saw what happened to Kirk Cousins in the second half of that year. I think there was a lot of things that was going on because he was also playing a little banged up as well, and then still recovering from that Achilles tear. But it it's definitely not an ideal number one option, but it at least would give you guys an option here, because worst case scenario for the Giants is come April 26th when the draft comes. Cam Ward goes first to the Tennessee Titans. Shador Sanders goes second to the Cleveland Browns, or someone trades up above the New York Giants. Like, let's say the Jets trade up and go get Shador Sanders, and now you guys are sitting there third overall and be like, you Travis Hunter would be a great addition to this team, or I don't think y'all would go Abdul Carter, just with the edge
No.
rushers y'all have. But worst case scenario, though, but then now you're sitting there and every team has their quarterback. You're going to be trying to absolutely dumpster dive for a quarterback. So you at least get a more seasoned veteran there that can maybe come and run the offense, and then it could be something similar as like halfway through the season. If you do end up getting one of those quarterbacks, then they can come in while he's learning behind Kirk Cousins, as you kind of saw with what they did with Michael Penix. Ryan,
Yeah.
another option though that you really like is something similar to what Pittsburgh did this past year, which is going after Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really like it, but I think you look at Justin Fields and
Oh,
kind of
fair.
what
Yeah.
what he was able to do in his short amount of time as a starter. I think that would be intriguing. You could just go sign him to even just like a 1-year $10 million deal or 1-year $8 million deal. Sam Darnold kind of got a similar contract there as well. So you just throw $8 million to Justin Fields. I think that would be interesting there, and then it still gives you about another 15 million left. I know it says 30, but we try to leave about 15 left for
draft picks and
draft picks and whatnot.
in-season signings, yeah, and so I think that's I think that would be an interesting option because we've seen a couple teams do this now the past couple of years, like Sam Darnold this past year, like he's going to get a big contract. We've seen Baker Mayfield do that now. We've also seen Jared Goff. Of course, he was traded and then proved himself in Detroit, and then now he got a big contract, and so maybe it's something like that works out, and then the Giants would at least have their quarterback just in case. But even then, too, then that's where you just don't know how the draft is going to shape up. And
Yeah.
then I think the last option, this would be something like worst case scenario, and this kind of goes along with the Drew Lock situation. But you go a Drew Lock route, or if you want to go externally, you maybe get Jameis Winston or a guy that I think would be very interesting because he does have several seasons of starting experience. Would be Mac Jones, a backup quarterback at Jacksonville, and we even got to
Mac
see him
Jones might
play.
fall into that Justin Fields category, but we'll have to see.
He's like so. Drew Lock would be like $5 million or $4 million or something like that. Justin Fields would be closer to 10. I feel like Mac Jones would be like in the middle. Like I think
Yeah,
he'd be
yeah.
an upgrade from Drew Lock, and he'd be a little more consistent.
Mhm.
But he wouldn't have the arm of Drew Lock. And so
No,
Drew
no.
Lock and Will Levis to me are like extremely comparable.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong on that, but so that's what's interesting though with this quarterback situation here, and that's what's going to really divvy up what type of cap space they have. Because if you are Brian and Joe, you're on your last leg. Like you need to give yourself the best opportunity to be somewhat competitive going into this year. So I don't really think you're not really too concerned about 26. You're trying to worry about the problem right now when it comes to the cap space. And so, but that's what's going to be very interesting is like the more cap space they use for a quarterback, the less money they have to go and get a cornerback to go and help them out. Like even too, like go look at this. Like so, let's say they do go Justin Fields for $8 million or something like that, or the $10 million. Another thing they need is going to be secondary help, and they're still going to have to hit that 15 million goal. What's going on here? Oh, there we
Sorry,
go.
I'm trying to add Justin Fields back in.
No, you're good.
We'll do 8.5 million just because I
Eight and a
accidentally
half million.
did
Perfect.
not
So,
eight.
and then let's go to if I'm just looking at the top secondary guys here. Here we go. Oh, 1 second here. Secondary, and I'm just looking at my computer screen here, but there's going to be guys. This thing's glitching out.
Wow, you could go sign some Hall of Famers. Charles
Ty
Woodson,
Law.
you could sign Ty Law,
You get him for
Champ
like $1 million,
Bailey.
I
I
bet.
that's insane.
But you can use some of this money here though to really go and improve your secondary and go get some veteran guys like Justin Simmons or maybe even guys like Kendall Fuller, Stephon Gilmore as well. See what DJ Reed's going for and have some of that money and really get another good lockdown corner to go alongside with Adoree Jackson and Deontay Banks as well. So the more money you spend on a quarterback, the less flexibility you're going to have on bringing in new guys. So that's what's going to be fascinating with the Giants here on how they handle this quarterback position because
Yeah.
it's just they put themselves in a very precarious situation by guessing wrong or not guessing, choosing wrong on Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones situation.
Yeah. Well, Philadelphia is thankful for that, but,
They're extremely
uh,
thankful.
I that to me is one of the bigger questions. Like, what do the Giants do, not just with the quarterback position, but at 3? Because if they punt on free agency and don't really sign, like let's say like they do what the Patriots did, and they just like go sign a Jacoby Brissett, and just well, one, the Patriots were in a slightly different situation last year because they knew they were going to get a quarterback. They just didn't know necessarily which one.
Yeah,
And so there's only 2 quarterbacks, so they're hoping that one of the teams ahead of them passes on a quarterback. And frankly, I think you need to cover your bases because if you don't have a good season in 2025, Brian and Joe are homeless or not jobless. They won't be homeless.
they're
They made a lot of
jobless. I'm sure their
money.
homes are really nice,
Yeah.
and I'm sure
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have.
yeah.
Sure, their net worth is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, if they have to move, but yeah,
Yeah.
when it comes to just trying to keep their job, that's what's going to be interesting about just how they go about navigating this year because they're just in kind of feel like they're just between a rock and a hard place because you go look at that division now and they're clearly the worst team, even with the struggles that the Cowboys went through and the injuries that they had. It's like, I still think Dak Prescott and CD Lamb alone could beat this Giants team.
Oh,
like,
yeah. Yeah.
and so, uh, and then obviously you go look at Washington now and then Philly's Philly's like above average, I would say. When it comes, no, I'm just kidding. They're clearly the best team in the league. And so it's funny too. Just last time I was just thinking about this, and the Giants play involved in this. You know how many awful decisions other teams had to make for this Philadelphia team to have this roster? Like I'm talking about the
Oh,
Giants letting go of Saquon Barkley.
okay.
Talking about the Tennessee Titans trade with AJ Brown. People not taking Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
Just because like
Well, that one
everybody was
I understand a little bit just because the character concerns, but uh,
I is yeah. No,
yeah,
I get it. I mean, a
yeah.
lot of bad things, I guess, could have
Cooper
happened, but
DeJean falling to like 45 or whatever it was. It's
yeah,
just insane. Like,
yeah. And then to be fair though, I mean, a white corner. What's the success of white corners in the
yeah, but
NFL?
you go look now. You have Riley Moss, Cooper DeJean, both from Iowa. Like,
They have
it's
they have Reed Blankenship also too. The Eagles. And
yeah,
so,
yeah. So
but
they have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Howie Roseman does such a great job. I know this is a Giants video, and they do not want to hear us praise the Eagles, but
yeah.
I mean, I do feel like the Giants they have some good pieces. That defensive
Oh
line when
yeah.
everybody's healthy is really solid. Malik Neighbors looks like a really solid piece. Tyron Tracy Jr. another really solid guy. There or appears to be
Welcome on the
after
show at any time.
yeah,
Our,
yeah.
our brother Tyrone. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it is it, it's really just that quarterback position that is holding them back from
Yeah.
not I wouldn't say necessarily being like a Super Bowl team, but like they would be a playoff contender ish, like like a wild card team, I think, if they had more substantial quarterback play and a more consistent offensive line.
Yeah.
So
Only. That's it. They just need to
yeah,
get
yeah,
best
that's
round
it.
picks.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, look, with that being said, let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this Giants mock free agency. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? Other than that, we'll see you guys next time.